Hi, welcome to In Jesus' Name podcast. I'm Shanan Glasgow, and this is Becky Criswell. You may or may not know her if you came to the Shore Sisters Growing Faith Conference that we had back in March. You heard me talk about it a little bit. Well, Becky was one of the speakers there, but her and I go back a little ways. We go back to Island Alliance, and we were pregnant at the same time. You were pregnant with the twins,
I was.
and I was pregnant with Josie.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, did we know each other before that, or was that like what kind of connected
I
us?
think that was the
Yeah.
start of it. Yeah.
It's so funny. I feel like a lot of the women that come on and share their story are women that I've connected with through pregnancy. Whether our kids were pregnant, we were pregnant at the same time, or something of that nature. It is so funny how that is, how we still connect in that way.
Oh yeah. When you're pregnant and going through all the things, you're looking for somebody who's miserable with you.
That's right. That's right. Oh my goodness. So Becky was able to share her story at Shore Sisters, but I would love to let's start off in prayer, and then I want you to start off with where you were a year ago, almost to the day. So God, I just thank you for Becky. I thank you for this time together, Lord, and I just pray that you would have your hand on this conversation, that God, it would be guided and directed by you, that you would just speak through us, Father, that it would be your will in this conversation, that whoever is listening on the other side of the phone or the computer, that they would hear your heart, Lord, that they would know that you are with them through Becky's story, because it's a beautiful story of your presence and your peace that surpasses all understanding. So, Father, I pray that whoever's listening would know that you are for them and you are with them today, regardless of their circumstances. We love you and we praise you, Lord, in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
So, yeah, I would love for you to tell anyone who's listening where you were about a year ago. And when you gave your talk, that's what blew my I cried throughout your entire talk, by the way. But when you shared your testimony at the Growing Faith Conference, you said that it was almost a year ago to the day. And tell us about where you were in that season of your life.
Yeah. So about a year ago, like you said, it was the very week of the conference last year that I really went downhill into a deep pit of depression and anxiety. And it's not the first time I had been there. And it's always kind of, I don't want to say it sneaks up out of nowhere because it's it's brewing for a long time, but then it just tank.
Yeah.
So it had all kind of hit around that week, and which led to several weeks of just total despair, not being able to get out of bed, not being able to care for my kids. A lot of it revolved around health anxiety, which has been a lifelong struggle for me. Um, I I went to the hospital for a day, just that bad, like really deep despair. And yeah, the Lord brought me through it, and which is why I'm here and able to tell you about it today. And I'm excited to share more as we get into it. Whenever anybody asks me to share my story, I don't always know what parts I want to share. So I'm always asking the Lord, where do you want me to go with this? Because the first time I spoke at a women's event, I was very young and I felt like I have one story. I didn't have to think about it. But as we all know, as you get older and you experience more life, you have a lot more good and bad to add to your story. So, my anxiety goes back probably to middle school. So there's so many things that I feel like I can relate to people on so many different levels. So I never know, should I start with the anxiety that started in middle school? Should I start with the perfectionism and the people pleasing that I've experienced almost all my life, or the eating disorder that I had throughout high school and college, and an exercise addiction, basically. Should I talk about marriage struggles early on and relationship struggles that pretty much stemmed from these other things? Or health problems that I've had along the way, or infertility, which was a result of my past eating disorder. So many different things that I never know, what road you want to take, you want to go down with my story. But as I said when I talked at the Shore Sisters, I can really sum it up into one thing, and that's my longing to be in control that I've had to fight with my whole life. And all of these things kind of boil down to that. Yeah.
Yeah. It is interesting. When we get to the root of it and it's like, okay, I'm anxious, but why am I anxious? Or I'm fearful, or I'm trying to fill a hole, but what is that all about? And so how did you discover that, okay, this is about control? This isn't about, really necessarily people pleasing, but I'm trying to control something. How did you get to kind of the bottom of that? What that look like?
So as I've gone through many different seasons like this, you know, it gets a little bit easier each time to look back and see, okay, what caused this downward spiral, and what was God teaching me in that? And I'm finally getting to the point where I'm grateful for those seasons, even though I don't want to relive them. But it has taught me what is going on in my heart. And so by looking back at the several seasons that I've been through, I can see where the reason I was feeling so anxious is because I was in a season where things were beyond my control. Um, and it wasn't even until I realized that I could look back years ago to my eating disorder struggle and how that was just a grasp for control. That's something very tangible that when you feel like the world or your external circumstances are beyond your control, you grasp for anything that you can try to control.
Yeah. And I think all of us do that on some level, in some way, but it's sometimes these deeper lies or insecurities or trauma or whatever we're believing that feeds that a little bit more. Because it's funny, a friend of ours, we talk about, she loves cutting grass and I love weed whacking, because I can cut it, it's cut, and yes, it'll come back. But I can cut it and it's cut and it lays there and it's done. And somebody doesn't come back 2 minutes later and spill yogurt all over it. So it's like this, I can actually tangibly see that what I did made a difference and I affected it, and now it's better because of it, and it lasts a week. And so it's like this one little area that it just feels so good. So we want to, like, if I've had a stressful day, I know that I can put in my earbuds and I can go outside and I can weed whack, and it's just like,
that's how I feel about vacuuming.
I know, I
instant gratification when you hear it coming, sucking up in the vacuum. You're like, yes, I did something.
I know it is. It also makes me think of the mom from not Fantastic Four, Incredibles. And she gets to the door and she's like, because it starts crackling. She's like, I gotta go into the office and vacuum down too. It's funny. It's kind of this good and bad thing. Yeah. Yeah, it is interesting when we get to the root of that. And so many things that you said in that season, I have repeated to other people, or I have repeated to myself. Um, because my bad seasons were sandwiched and right in between, your bad season was in between two of my bad seasons. And so I used that when I went through the most recent a couple months ago, and that the Lord's brought me through it before. So I know that He'll bring me through it again. And I've used that, you've said that, because it really helped me remember that it's not just about this struggle that's today. He's the same God. And so, and in some ways, I'm the same Shanan. And so, if that's the case, then He's still going to bring me through this. And He knows my difficulties, and He knows my struggles, and He knows my tendencies and the things that I struggle with. And He knows what I need in order to deliver me from that season. And so, that's been something that I've repeated to myself, is I've seen Him do it too many times, but I know He's going to do it again.
My husband's always telling me, write this stuff down, write this stuff down. And I'm not good at that, but you really have to, because I'm in a good season right now. So it's easy for me to float through the day and think everything's great. But when I know there will be another season that's in the valley, and I have to be able to rely on God's character. I can't, one thing I've wrestled with in my faith walk is doubt. When I get to these seasons, I start doubting. Do I really believe this? Is God really who He says He is? And we're not always going to have all of those answers, and we're not always going to understand God, but we can look at His character through the way He's been faithful to us time and time again in all the previous valleys that we've walked through. So it's not something that I'm good at, but it's something that I'm learning to do, to be able to look backward at the pits that he's pulled me out of, and he's been faithful.
And something else that you really taught me in that season was to reach out to people. You were so good about that, and I hadn't done that before. So when I went through it again, I was like, okay, Becky reached out to people. I'm going to reach out to people because it's so hard to do when you're struggling to reach out to people. But that was so huge. And it was such a blessing to me that I could be there for you. As I know a couple other women that you reached out to, we could rally around you. And so that blessed us and bolstered our faith because we could tangibly see the good season that we're in, how we can bless others. And same pulling from my past experiences and I just remembered that. I was like, man, she was so good about reaching out. And it wasn't even this like perfectly well done. It's just, I need help. I'm struggling. I need help. And I think that that stemmed from us doing life together. Like we're in this small group together. And I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like there was opportunities where I could share a little bit, you could share a little bit. And then when it was time that you were really struggling, it was like, okay, these are my people. Like
Right.
I know them. I have faith. I have relationship with them. I have trust with them. And I think that's really important to remember that even if we're in a good season, that we don't just go about our own little lives, that we reach out to people, that we create pockets of community so that God can use us with those people to invest into them if they're in a bad season.
Yeah, absolutely. And I used to feel guilty when I was in a good season. And I'm learning now that I think God is really kind in that he puts people together, and often, like you said, my low was between two of yours. We weren't in them at the same time. And I think he's really kind to do that so that we can lift each other up. So we're not all in the pit together.
Yeah, right. Even though sometimes it feels like
sometimes that. And that does happen, but he is faithful. He has always brought people into my life at just the right time when I need them. Maybe when I went through, I had a skin cancer diagnosis, and he randomly brought a friend who I had no idea she had also been through that. And just by chance, not by chance, by God, we got back in touch with each other on like the very week that I found out about my diagnosis, and she was able to talk me through, calm me down, walk me through the process. And I just think he's so faithful like that to give you the people at the right time. And I've learned to not feel guilty in those seasons, because I'll have my seasons where I'm down and somebody will have to pull me up. And then in my good seasons, it's like you said, it's a blessing when people reach out and trust you enough to walk alongside them in that valley.
Yeah, it never ceases to amaze me how he prepares those things even before we enter that season, and how he's laying that groundwork. Yeah, it's pretty incredible. What I loved from your talk was this idea of seeking, and this was part of the theme from that week. But I kind of wanted to hit on these 3 points because they're so good. And it was, are we seeking control or are we seeking surrender? And then it was seeking answers versus seeking rest, and then seeking outcomes versus seeking presence. And I thought those comparisons were so good: control versus surrender, and answers versus rest, outcomes versus present. Um, can you talk about what each of those kind of like meant for you, the control versus the surrender, and the answers versus rest, the outcome versus presence? Like what did that look like for you tangibly to learn each of those in that season of your life, and how did that kind of play out the way that the Lord weaved that into really your identity? Like, okay, this is who you are in Christ. Let's rewire that to not be focused on control or answers or outcomes.
Right. Can we hit one at a time?
Let's do one. Control versus surrender. What? You can't? I know. I was
my
like,
brain's all over
that
the
might
place.
have been too much. I was thinking it was too much to write out. Thank you. Yes. Control versus surrender. We'll start there.
Okay. Yeah. So this is a lesson I feel like I really started to learn. My first season of really dark depression was in 2020. I had a newborn, and the pandemic was happening. It was the very, very beginning of it when we still really didn't know what was going on. And I had this, idea in my head of what it was my fourth child, and what it was going to look like to bring this baby into our family. And it didn't look anything like that because the world was completely different. All of a sudden, um, I couldn't even see my family. People were dropping off food on our porch and looking at us through the window,
Right.
and I couldn't control any of it. And I think that's the first time I really realized that um, I have no control, first of all. And my faith felt rocky at that point because up until then, my life had been a lot of predictability, a lot of feel good. My faith, I think, felt like rainbows and sunshine a lot. And then in that season, I realized, oh, this world is completely out of our control and scary. And so it's been since then that I've had to work on what it looks like to surrender whatever may be, whatever God has for me that's not my vision, because that certainly wasn't my vision for how that year was going to go. None of us, I'm sure. We all remember that as being nothing like what we were planning for that year. So since then, I've been learning to surrender my will and my idea of what things should look like and lean into those seasons and say, okay, God, what do you want to do here? And it's actually such freedom in that. It's hard to get to that point where you completely surrender your will and your life to God. But when you can start to do that, you get a taste of actually how freeing that is and how that has lifted a lot of my anxiety, knowing that these outcomes aren't up to me, with everything in my life, with my kids. I mean, that's so hard. You want what you want for your kids.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
But I used to be so anxious about what might happen to my kids.
Yes.
Me
too.
I mentioned I struggle a lot with health anxiety. And I think we live in a society where there's a false sense of control. Everybody has a remedy for your health. And you have this false sense that if I just do this right thing or that right thing or eat this or do that, I can control my health. Well, we can't. We can. I'm all about being a good steward of your body and all of those things. But in the long run, God's plan is his plan. And when you surrender to that, there's a freedom in knowing that this outcome doesn't depend on me.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times, especially if we struggle with control, we think of it as like, okay, I just have to let go and just hope for the best. And what it is you're not just letting go, you're placing your trust in someone else other than yourself. And so when I'm trying to control things, I'm trusting myself to provide. But when I am surrendering to God, it's looking like me trusting the one who not only created me, but who knows everything, who's working everything for my good, who's creating every circumstance, who's pulling everybody together. So that space of trusting God instead of trusting myself is not necessarily giving up control. It's giving the control to the person who can actually control
Right.
it instead of me. And when I thought of it that way, there was so much peace in that because then I'm not constantly thinking, oh, okay, let me just throw caution to the wind and hope for the best, just trust God. And it's like, no, I got to do, especially because I come from a doing family. You have to do, you have to make your way, you got to figure it out, And so when you realize that you're not just doing nothing, you are putting your trust and your control in the one who can actually control it and not in yourself. It was just that small shift of seeing that I'm not just throwing it, I'm actually placing it in a better hand than my own.
Right. And knowing that even when you can't see it, even when it looks like things are a mess, and it might take a long time before you see it, you might not see it. But knowing that God always has your best in mind, knowing the final outcome, that everything will be right in the end, that's what really helps me, is that I might not see this side of heaven what this was meant for.
Right.
But knowing that he promises it will all be good in the end. And also looking back at how he's made it all right before.
Right.
I can see that in a lot of situations.
Yeah. Remembering for sure is very important. And God talks a lot about that in the Bible, and then rocks of remembrance and build an altar to remember, and always talking about how important it is to remember what He's done.
Mm-hmm.
So, what does that? We kind of talked about the control versus surrender and what that looks like practically. Lead into talking about answers versus rest, because I think part of that control is I want to know. So I want to
Mm-hmm.
know what's going to happen next. I want to understand. So what does it look like to seek Him and His, like to put His yoke on you and to learn from Him, to rest in Him? What
Mm-hmm.
does that look like versus, again, instead of just being like, oh well, whatever, the Lord will figure it out for me. How does it look placing that in His hands, to not seek the answers but to seek His rest? What does that look like for you?
Mm-hmm. For me, I think I mentioned already that I've had doubt. I've had a lot of doubt, and I want everything explained. I want to be able to understand God and what He's doing before I trust Him. Before I let go.
I'm gonna need the manual. I'm gonna
Yeah.
need to know.
And that has really played into a lot of my seasons of depression and anxiety, because it was in those seasons that I felt like okay, God, I am falling apart here. I need to know what you're doing. I need to know what you're about. I was seeking answers in a way that I never had before, and feeling the urgency and the necessity of finding these answers, because in my mind it was like, I'm not going to be okay until I can understand you and exact I mean exactly what his word is saying. Sometimes it's not always clear. We have to ask him to show us, and sometimes that takes time. And in those seasons, I didn't want that answer. I don't have time. I need to be okay right now. So I've had to learn to just rest in his character and in knowing who he is, rather than fully understanding and being able to see what he's doing and what he's going to do.
Yeah, and I think that that also plays into the, like, say it before you really feel it or believe it. I was thinking about this in church the other day. Our intern, our resident, was giving a sermon, and I was thinking about all the women who are listening to him, and I was like, man, I was thinking he's doing such a good job of hitting what we need to do better. And I thought, this is so good because it's focusing on tangibles, it's focusing on practicals. And we so often hear these feel good sermons, and it's like, okay, you need to feel better, you need to do this, and you'll feel better, whatever. And not necessarily in our church, but in the Big C church. And I love that all of our pastors come from a place of, giving a hard message, but also this is how we practically do this. And I was thinking about all the women that are sitting there listening, and we are feelers. No matter which way you slice us, no matter which kind of woman you got in front of you, we are feelers. And some of us more so than others, but we do often lead with, how does this impact this person? How is this going to impact our family? What does it look like if I make this decision? And not as a rule, but as a generalization, women tend to feel. And so I love the idea of putting back into practice what I talk about all the time, which is heavenly habits, and putting these practicals in place where it's like, I need to say to myself, this is what God's done before, this is who he is, regardless of how I feel right now. And I think that our ancestors had to do that more because they couldn't go to a therapist. They couldn't. And there's beauty to both. Like, there's beauty in, like, all right, we just got to keep on. We got to just keep moving and focus on something better. Think of the positive. Sometimes we need to dig deeper and deal with whatever it is. We can't. So there's a balance there. You can't go one way or the other. But I think it's important that we don't go too far the other way now in therapy, in feeling, in addressing all of these issues. We do need to dig deep and deal with stuff, but then at a certain point, we've got to just know that God's going to do what he's going to do. And I've got to put one foot in front of the other, and I've got to move forward. And so I think that comes from, especially when you can't move forward, when you're like, yeah, I don't want to be here. It's saying the same things over and over again, reading God's word over and over again, and repeating that to yourself and sitting at Jesus' feet so that he can do the work. And it happens over a long period of time. Like, I know for both of us, those seasons have been, hey, months later, I start to see a little tiny light that gets a little brighter and a little brighter, but it's not this one and done. It's not all of a sudden I feel better, even when you're doing all the right things. It doesn't mean that tomorrow you're going to feel amazing. So I love that we are putting back into place these practical habits that are teaching us. No, I'm going to teach my body that this is what we're doing right now. Right now, we're trusting the Lord, even if you don't feel it, and especially if you don't believe it.
Yeah, absolutely. I resonate with that. And, like you said, sometimes it's months.
Yeah.
And then there's a bright light. And then your body stores those memories. So anything can kind of take you back to that dark place all of a sudden.
Yes.
For me, 1 year later, so the springtime of this year, even like the weather getting warmer or my son's birthday just brought back those feelings of the year before. And instantly I'm panicking, like, no, I don't want to go there again. I don't want to go there again. And that's when you have to put those practices in place to, because you're feeling one thing, but you have to tell yourself, no, I'm trusting in God. I'm trusting God. And I even had to say, I'm trusting in him even if I go through this again.
I know you love Disney, and so you'll appreciate this reference. I refer to this often. They really did the Frozen movies well, in my opinion. Don't message me if you firmly disagree. I don't care if you disagree with them on this. But the point is, I love how Elsa and Anna, and when you say that our bodies have memories, I fully agree with that. Sometimes I'm like, why am I in such a like funk, or why am I struggling so much? And I'll be like, oh, okay. It's that now we don't give it merit or credit, but we recognize it and we say, okay, that's not now. We kind of justify it in our mind. But Elsa and Anna, they, in this Frozen 2, I have 3 girls, so we've obviously watched it 100 million times. And Frozen 2, they said that water has memories, and that's how they found out about their parents, is the memories that came up through the water. And it made me think of your body has memories. And I love what they did was they didn't shove it aside, but they also didn't stay there. And one of my favorite quotes is Anna saying, you get out of this darkness essentially by just doing the next right thing. And she just says, do the next right thing. And I love that because sometimes as moms, and I know you and I have both been in this season, I need to get up and just go take a shower. I need to just get up and go brush my teeth. I need to walk downstairs. And if that's all I accomplish today, I've at least gotten out of my situation and went into a different environment. I at least went downstairs. I went and took a shower. And I'm like, okay, that was a good step. And I dwell on that and not on the negative. And so I love that you just do the next right thing, even if it doesn't seem like a big thing. And then you find yourself after a little while, you're like, okay, I was able to go and that situation wasn't as bad. And that's not just for the dark seasons, that's for anything. Like right now, I'm trying to, and with the Lord, rewire some trauma that has been done over a long period of time in the darkness. And so how does God rewire my brain so that, one, I'm just not so jumpy every time my husband walks into the room and I don't know he's there, but which I know a lot of women can resonate with. But how do I sit with the Lord? He rewires my memories. So he deals with those memories and makes them better. And he doesn't make them good, but he brings good from it. And I so love that he reshapes it. And that just reminds me of Elsa and Anna, like pulling up those water memories and them being better for it.
And I had a feeling you were going to that, the next right thing, because that is what it feels like a lot of times. And I think that plays right into not having all the answers. Is you're not always going to be able to see what God is doing. You're not always going to be able to understand God, but you can sit with him and ask him, okay, just show me what I need to do next. And you do the best you can with what you know and what he's showing to you in that moment. And that's what you have to do. You just have to take the next step and lean into the people he's put around you. And sometimes if you feel like you can't take the step, there's people come alongside of you and they help you. They carry you to the next step.
Yeah. And it is. And I think that for a lot of us, we are like, okay, I have to do the right things. And then once I do the right things, okay, God, you're supposed to do your thing. Like I did my part. Where's your part? And there's two elements to that. One is that we have faith, that we trust a God, that we're resting in Him, that we're not looking for the answers. But the second part of that is realizing that it takes time.
Yeah.
That He is who He is and He will show us and He is faithful. But He's not a genie in a bottle. And we're not going to snap our fingers and say, I rubbed the lamp the right way. You should come out. He's going to say, are you really submitted? Do you really want to know me, or do you just want to know what I can do for you? Do you really want to know my character, or do you really just want answers that make you feel better? Because God is not in the business to make you feel better. He's in the business for your good and your abundance, and He'll give you His joy and His peace, but He's not here to try to make you feel better. In fact, He might even leave you in that difficult season for longer than you want because He's doing a bigger thing that you can't see. And it's just so important to remember that, because when we get into that, and that's what the friends, like you talked about, where I know that you and I have voice memoed constantly. I encouraging you, you encouraging me, back and forth. And just doing that allowed us, especially as moms, I highly encourage you, if you don't do this, this is a beautiful technique, is or trick, I don't know what to call it, tool in your tool belt, is to voice memo. Because I can't always, like, especially because we both homeschool. So usually during the school year, our faces are in the computer, in the book, whatever we're doing. And I could step outside when I knew they were in a good spot, and I could listen to your voice memo, and then I could talk back and you could hear my voice, and vice versa. And I love that because we're having a phone conversation without sitting on the phone together. And it
Right.
was a
Because
beautiful.
you're getting constantly interrupted if you're a mom. And I know so many times you sent me a message and you would start with, I just want you to hear my voice on this. And today everybody's texting all the time, and I admit, like, I'm a texter. I would rather text you than call you. I'm just gonna say that. I don't have time to be on the phone. Like I said, I'll get interrupted 75 times. But then you miss out on that, the voice of a friend lifting you up. You cannot get that through a text message. So I loved that. I loved what you taught me to do with the voice messages, and I would look forward to it. If I came back to my phone, I'm like, oh, Shanan sent me a message. You can just find 2 minutes to step outside and listen. Those 2 minutes often got me through the next 20 or the next 30 minutes.
You know what's so interesting? This, and I don't think I ever really told you this, was I was doing those voice memos with a few people, but with you, it was really like touch and go, touch and go. It was like, okay, I would like look for the, okay, she's not doing good, let me walk away. It was really, we were really hinging upon those. And that's how this podcast got started, was because I kept sending these voice memos. And I'm like, man, some of this stuff is truths that I needed to hear in my difficult season when I was really struggling and it was really dark. And because I don't see myself as a podcaster, I'm not like gosh, please never use the word influencer. I am not someone who, like, I would much rather sit and go grab a cup. Like, even this sometimes can feel non-organic in some ways, because I feel like I'm like on, but let's grab a cup of coffee together. And so this creates that space and allowed me to be able to, as I'm walking with people, reference episodes and then send it to their friends. And so this podcast was something the Lord brought out of those seasons of being able to walk with people, them doing that for me, but then also me wishing I had had that in that season, was just to be able to pull something up and say, okay, this is real. This is not like, all right, let's dive into James 5, which is good. And I do that sometimes, but being able to share real stories and dive into, like, what does it practically look like to walk with Jesus is huge.
Right. My first season of depression in 2020, that's when I got into listening to podcasts constantly. I don't listen to quite as many, but it became a joke. My husband got me stickers of myself saying, I have a podcast for that. Because everyone would bring up something to me. I'm like, oh, there's a podcast for that. There's a podcast. I would send them. Yeah. But in that, especially that season when we were isolated, I needed to hear somebody's voice. So I found a few podcasts that I trusted. And exactly what we're talking about, hearing someone else's voice on that subject.
Yes.
Rooted in scripture. got me through a lot of hard days.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And I go back and forth about whether podcasts are good or whether they point us away from the church or back to the church. And that's my goal, is to continue to always remind you that, number one, I am not a theologian, that I am just your average Joe. And even so, I wasn't even brought up learning about God necessarily. So it's just real life and real Jesus, honestly. So I want to, before I continue down my little rabbit trail there, um, outcomes versus presence. I really wanted to talk about this because we are very much an outcome culture. And so, how did that relate to your story? And what can we take away from that today? Understanding that it's more about, and they hear me say this all the time on the podcast. You guys are sick of me saying at the feet of Jesus, because that is where, like, even this morning, taking and picturing. I'm so ADD sometimes that I have to picture what I'm doing in my mind. So I picture myself taking whatever it is. If it's my kids, I picture myself putting my kids at the feet of Jesus. I picture myself at the feet of Jesus, or taking shame or baggage or frustration or anger or difficulty in a relationship. And I take that and I picture myself sitting at Jesus's throne in heaven, where he is ruling and has authority. And I picture myself literally putting it at his feet, and then I sit there. And that helps me visualize. It helps me hone in on the environment that I'm in, because we are in heavenly environments when we are praying. There is heavenly battle going on around us. So I picture myself in heavenly places, putting that at the feet of Jesus. So, how do we shift our minds to focusing more on his presence than the outcome of the situation, and practically in our world when we are so results driven?
Right. This is a really hard one for me.
It is really, yeah. I know, I'm looking forward to learning.
No,
Please.
I don't know. If I could
me.
share the scripture passage that I shared during my talk, because I really felt like this gave me a 3-step process to this.
Yeah, no, I love it.
But it comes from 2nd Chronicles chapter 20, and it's when King Jehoshaphat, and when I was practicing my talk, I tried to do it for my kids, and my 10-year-old son laughed every time I said Jehoshaphat, so I couldn't.
Jehoshaphat who?
Yeah, he thought it was hilarious, and he would lose his mind. So I was like, forget it. You are a terrible audience. I am not practicing for you anymore. But King Jehoshaphat, he got word that this vast army was coming up against him, and I related that in my talk to any time. We all know a time in our life when we've gotten word that something is coming up against us. It could be a relational struggle, a health diagnosis, a lost job, anything that's your vast army coming against you. And my initial reaction in those moments has always been panic and then take action. Like, I panicked first. I'm a freeze person, the fight, flight.
And they keep adding more F's. Fight, flight, freeze. What's that? There's another one.
I don't know.
I don't know. They keep adding. I'm like, okay.
Well, I definitely freeze and then I fight. So that's my instinct. But Jehoshaphat, it says he was afraid and he resolved to seek the Lord. So he made that conscious decision. I'm going to seek the Lord on this. And then further down, we see how all of the people gather and they're all seeking the Lord and they're praying to him. And then God answers them. And what he tells them to do is, let me find it here. Sorry. Do not be afraid or discouraged because of this vast number, for the battle is not yours, but God's. Tomorrow go down against them. You will see them coming. Let me skip ahead. And you will find them at the end of the valley facing the wilderness of Jeruel. You do not have to fight this battle. And then here's where I wrote down these 3 steps. God told them, position yourselves, stand still, and see the salvation of the Lord. He is with you, Judah and Jerusalem. Do not be afraid or discouraged. Tomorrow go out and face them, for the Lord is with you. And I just love this because the first thing he tells them to do is position themselves. When I think about what that looks like for me, it's not just in the moment of crisis, but a continual everyday, where is my position in relation to God? And, am I sitting at the feet of Jesus? Am I in his word? Am I including him in my everyday activities? And in this season that I'm in right now, I admit that is a struggle because
Yeah.
I'm busy. I'm probably too busy, and I can go about my day and sometimes not bring him into it at all. So I've got to constantly remind myself that we need to position ourselves at his feet every day so that when that crisis comes or that army is coming, we're already in the right position to hear from him, to receive from him. And then he says to be still. And I think that's another thing that's really hard for us, especially in this culture where everything is fast and instant. And we just, I think a lot of people pray, but they say, okay, I prayed about that. And then you go off and you handle it yourself. I know I'm guilty of that. So you position yourself, then you be still and you wait. And then it says the Lord will fight for you. And so that is how I am learning to seek his presence, seeking to sit at his feet, surrendering to him, being still and waiting. And instead of just looking for the outcome instantly.
Yeah.
I still like to see the outcome, but I have to learn that even if the outcome comes years from now, I still have the good thing, and that's sitting at his feet. You can position yourself and be still in his presence the whole time that you're waiting for the outcome. You don't need to get to the outcome first.
And it just depends on what your definition of outcome is. Like if I know that my God's on the throne, that means that he's resting. He is assured of the battle. He's assured of who's going to win and who's going to lose. He's assured of what he needs to do in order to provide for us so that we have what we need, we have peace, we have abundance. So all of those things come from a place of a God who is at rest on his throne. And that outcome is always success. That outcome is always deliverance. That outcome is always a place of victory. But when I focus on how I want the outcome to look like versus that truth, then I'm putting God into some kind of box that says, okay, God, this outcome needs to look like this in order for me to feel like I can move forward in a peaceful way, or to feel like I have learned something or it's been worthwhile or whatever the situation is. And so when I look at his outcome versus my desire for outcome, then I really can rest and I can be assured in his presence. And so there is still a focus on an outcome, but it's the focus on the outcome that he's already obtained for us. And I feel this so deeply in spiritual warfare because talk about something you can't control. And that is the greatest fear and the greatest depth of darkness that you can face. And so for a lot of us, that battle is mental health. That darkness, I mean, that's it's very similar. And that's why I firmly believe that all mental health is a spiritual battle. There's a spiritual element to it. There's physical elements to it, but there's spiritual elements to it. And I would venture to say that the authority and the longevity and the impact that it has depends on our allegiance in that season. Not done perfectly, but given to the Lord ultimately. And so, because there's been longer seasons where I have just spiraled out and lived in fear versus giving it to the Lord and finding peace in the middle of that circumstance. So that outcome, I think, looks more like finding that the presence is the prize and not okay, what do I want this to look like? Because nobody chooses to be in 9 months of oppression, 9 months of anxiety, whatever the season is. People don't look and say, man, I really want that. I want to walk through that. I want to get out of this sucker as quickly as possible. Whatever the season is, whether it's an illness with a kid or a loss of a family member or job loss, not knowing where you're going to get your next paycheck. All of these things can be very shaking and detrimental to our foundation. But when we choose to take that and give that to the Lord and take that authority back and give it to God, then we can see his reign and his power and his provision in those circumstances versus focusing inward or focusing on the enemy. And then we feel the outcome even before it happens.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely agree with that. I I know for seasons of where I've been really low, like you said, when you're focusing inward, you it's impossible to see the light around you, that God is with you. And there's so many days when I just don't feel God. And that's okay. You're not always going to feel
Yes.
him.
Say it. Say it.
But you know he's there, even if you can't feel it. But I couldn't get past that in that season. So it was a constant battle for me to have to remind myself I know he's there, even if I can't feel it. And like you said, there's always a spiritual component. And I do think there's a physical component too. And I think, I mean, our enemy knows what that physical component is for you.
Yes.
Like, I have always struggled with obsessive thinking.
Right.
I can't get out of my own way. I can't turn these thoughts off. And he knows that. And he capitalizes on it.
Yes.
To the point where I spiraled down and down and down and get to this place where I've been a few times because I've let him.
Right.
I've sat there with it. And I've, I've fed it. I've given to it. So
yeah. And it is hard, and it's not this perfect recipe, and there's no, okay, we have it all together and we've done this so well. And what I would say to the flip side of that are the people that are speaking into the lives of someone who's struggling. What I would say is that I would hope that in those situations we stop trying to put a band-aid on it and we choose our words carefully. And we don't have to be perfect at it, but I think that when we say things, instead of like you say to me, hey, I don't feel God, I don't see God, he's there. You just have to trust and believe that he's there. You know that truth. I'm not talking to a non-believer. You know that truth. So in that moment, what I have found has been more helpful for myself and for others was to say, this is really hard. Like, address that this is hard. This is a really dark season, and I'm sorry that you're walking through this. I know it can feel like God is not there, and that's the presence of the enemy. I'm with you. How can I pray for you? All of these things that instead of just saying, which essentially when you say something like, hey, God's with you, just pray about it, it'll get better. All of these things are like handing someone a tissue when they're crying. It's like, okay, you need to stop crying. And there's nothing wrong with obviously handing somebody a tissue. But I think I don't know if they teach this in therapy. A friend of mine shared this with me, that they taught her, you don't just hand somebody a tissue when they're crying, like as soon as they start crying, because it shows them that I want you to stop crying. Like, here you go, here's a tissue if you need it. And it's, again, not that the rule is you can't hand somebody a tissue, but it's this, we want, okay, that's enough, like that's too much, you need to stop. And we want to give you that Bible verse. Okay, you're feeling bad, let me send you that Bible verse. Because I've talked about this often. When you're in that dark season, not only do you not want to open up this Bible, but if you just send me a Bible verse when I reach out to you and help, I need actual, like, physical hands and feet of Jesus. I need you to say, okay, here's what we're going to do. And you can do this more and not so, some with some people, depending upon how close you are. But hey, I'm gonna come bring you dinner tonight. Does tonight work, or tomorrow? Like, just being available for people and not necessarily always asking permission, but being gracious and understanding. And there are ways that, depending upon who you're talking to, that you can show them real hands and feet and not just, hey, here's a Bible verse, I'm going to pray for you. And I think those people mean well, but I think it comes from a place of fear that I don't want to say the wrong thing, or I don't want to do the wrong thing, or I don't want to push too hard. But I have found, as someone who often puts her foot in her mouth and says the wrong thing, that if I lead with, hey, I genuinely want to be there for you and I genuinely want to show you love in this, how can I show you love right now? Do you want me to pray with you, or do you want me to, like, giving them options allows me to not pigeonhole myself into, like, okay, I'm going to do this to you. And you're like, okay, I didn't really ask you to bring a meal. You might give them 3 options, because when you're in the pit, you can't really make a lot of choices. You
Exactly.
can't, hey, how can I help you? I have no freaking clue. I don't want to be here. That's all I know.
Right.
You're like, I don't know what I need, but I just know I don't want to be here. And so giving them options and just being available to people so that you're not just slapping a band-aid on it, but you're really showing them that you're in this battle with them.
Right. And a year ago when I was there, you were doing all of those things, and it's because you had been through it,
Yeah.
and you knew it already. You knew this is what she needs, because you're exactly right. What I did not want was to have to make any decisions or think about anything, and you show up my door with some other people showed up my door, and it was okay. We're going to take care of your job for you. We're going to bring you food. We're going to take the kids on this day so that they're taken care of. We're going to bring your food. And when you all came over, it was like Matt's like, you're getting up. We're gonna. Well, actually, I think you all were like, we're just coming into your room. But I was like, no, no,